So, proper introduction. This is Shawn Askinosie. I'll let him tell you a lot of the details, but I think we have a few of you that maybe are new to Springfield, so you haven't been familiar with the local entrepreneur and celebrity, Shawn Askinosie. Uh, um, Currently is the owner of Askinosie Chocolate on Commercial Street, just a few blocks down the street from your campus. And last year, for this class, we went in and did a tour of the chocolate factory
Yeah.
and got some samples and all that. So I apologize for you all missing out on that, but such is life. Many things we're missing out on these days. So before John was a chocolatier, he was a defense attorney, and we've been friends for I don't know what 10 like 15 years, maybe 12, 15 years, something like that.
More than that, probably closer to 20.
Yeah, maybe. Long time. Um, and so I kind of saw. I don't know if we've talked about this before, but I remember looking back when I saw this transition happening in your career when we were at your house having dinner and you made
Hmm.
creme brulee, and I've never seen anybody like so
Hmm.
alive and passionate about making a dessert before. And looking back on it, I was like, there was the beginnings of something happening there.
Hmm. Yeah, that's right. That's
Um,
exactly right. Yeah.
and if I haven't talked about it before, it's on your reading list. But Sean's book, Meaningful Work, is fantastic. He wrote with his daughter, Lauren, who's also the mother of his lovely granddaughter. But let's tell us more about what it is you do, Sean, and how you got there.
Okay. Well, thanks again. I'm glad to be here and wish we could all be in person. And thanks for the invite, Brett. I really appreciate it and appreciate the chance to talk to you guys. Well, right now I'm still a lawyer. I keep my license active, but I don't practice and haven't for about 14 years. And but I did, as Brett said, practice law. I specialized in criminal law, um, and really built my reputation on murder cases. And um, but now I am a chocolate maker, and for the last 15 years or so, I've been buying cocoa beans around the world from farmers, currently in Ecuador, Amazon, Philippines, and Tanzania. And this year, I would have been taking my 46th origin trip since I started the company buying beans. So I visit the farms every year, and we were one of the first in the country to make chocolate from the bean. Um, Now there are many people doing it, and we sell our chocolate online all over the United States and ship it around the country. And we have about anywhere between 800 and 1,000 wholesale accounts. We sell to smaller specialty food stores around the country and coffee shops and places like that. Many, or if not most of them, are struggling right now. Um, but so, I pay farmers directly, help them open bank accounts. In almost all cases, help them become their own exporter so they can keep more of the profit for themselves and not have to pay middlemen and women who siphon off their profits. And then we have community development projects in some of the places where we buy beans. In the Philippines, we've had a school lunch program there since 2009. It's ongoing to this day, where even though the schools are closed, teachers are delivering food to malnourished children that we fund with no donations. We also had for 5 years a school lunch program in Tanzania where the kids were only eating one meal a day. All of it was sustainable with zero donations and sold and funded by products that we sold that were made by the local PTAs of those schools. We're sold out of tablia now, which is a hot chocolate product that funds our school lunch program in the Philippines, and we're sold out, which is a good thing, which means we're funded
Mhm.
all the way through next April. But we also have a program called Chocolate University where we engage local elementary school kids at Boyd Elementary, and then a middle school program at Pipkin. And then we have a high school program where we take juniors and seniors in high school who are part of a very competitive process to be in this program. We take them to Tanzania. And that is currently in partnership with Drury University. So that's a little bit about kind of the company and what we do.
Yeah, talk about. I love the story of. I mean, you feel free to weave in any of your like personal history, but in particular, I remember the story you've told many times before, but I particularly remember last year, sort of the kind of ethical challenges you were going through as an attorney, and the very kind of dramatic decisions that you made and points you came to.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people over the years, because during the time I was trying these cases, they were very high profile, and almost everyone thought that my clients were guilty in these high profile murder cases, but me. And when I say almost everyone, I mean almost everyone. They were filled with stress because of that, although that didn't really bother me that much because it was my job, and I knew that I wasn't specializing in, wills and trusts or corporate law, which has its own set of stresses, but this was a very, very particular area of the law.
Let me interrupt you for just a second too.
Sure.
So those of you that have not been around and been aware of Shawn, when he says high profile, we're talking Dateline NBC profile stories, and we're not just talking like this was on the cover of the local newspaper. Like these cases got national attention. So this was so the stress of it was more than just the local scene. There were some high stakes.
Yeah. Well, and also in one of my murder cases, my first murder trial was broadcast live on Court TV back when there was a Court TV, gavel to gavel with experts, basically doing color analysis, play by play of my performance. And if you can imagine this, think about this. KY3 stopped all of their daytime programming for 2 weeks and aired the trial gavel to gavel with nothing else. Nothing. Wow. So anyway, but a lot of people over the last 10 or so years, when they talk to me about my prior life as a criminal defense lawyer, or when they hear about it, or when I give talks around the country, a lot of times people will say, well, I bet you like your job a whole lot better now than your prior job. Or they say stupid things like, your job is so much sweeter now than I've heard that 500,000 times. And it takes me a while to explain the answer to that, which is it's not super simple. And the answer is no. No, I don't feel like this job is easier or better or sweeter. And the reason is because I really believed in what I did. And I still believe in this line of work. It's I think, a special group of people really on both sides, prosecutors and defense lawyers, who can do this work. It's necessary. It's often jobs that people don't want to look at. They don't want to see it. But it's necessary. And so I loved it. I loved the work. It didn't even seem like work to me for many, many years until a series of events kind of culminated to this place where I felt not ethically challenged to give me pause about maybe another line of work, but just the sort of totality of the circumstances. I'd done it for a lot. I'd never lost a criminal jury trial. And I did it for almost 20 years, and death threats. And I just thought, well, try something else. I've done this long enough. I'll develop a new passion for something else. And so, but what I wanted to kind of briefly talk about are the ethical challenges that I did face that I think are worthy of consideration and discussion, and what I did to resolve the ethical challenges in my own mind. And let me just add, I will say, as a business person, or as a lawyer, but especially as a business person, anytime that you have to have a meeting or even really a conversation with a colleague or coworker, and you say, I can't really decide, does this seem ethical? Usually the fact that you have to have a meeting or have someone give you feedback is a red flag that it's probably not the ethical choice, because um, of that, just sort of the trigger that's kind of bringing the question to light, I think often is the answer to the question itself. But in legal cases, there can be something different. And the reason is because there's a very specific set of rules that have been codified for lawyers and judges to follow, that are federal rules and state rules called rules of professional conduct, which are really ethical rules. And these are bright lines that lawyers and judges have to follow. So if this, then that. And I suppose you could say that they sort of are rooted in some kind of ethical or moral judgments from 200 years, 250 years ago. But I particularly enjoyed those classes in law school, ethics classes, or what we called the professional conduct. And the reason that I enjoyed them is because, and it was the only class in law school that I aced. And the reason is because I knew that I was going to practice criminal law. And I knew that I needed to know where the line was in those cases. Are you guys following me?
Mm-hmm.
You follow me? I needed to know where the line was. Why? Because I was going to step right up to it. I was going to step right up to the line. I'm not going to go over the line. I'm going to go right to the line. Why would I do that? Because I knew that I would have people's lives in my hands, and I would be responsible for their defense to the best that I could, which includes knowing exactly where the line is. So what that means is that every client that I had, in my mind, I presumed them to be my only client. I didn't golf with judges or prosecutors. I don't play golf, but whatever the corollary to that would be. I didn't go out to dinner with judges and prosecutors. They weren't my friends. I didn't want to have any question in my mind that I could do whatever it would take to advocate for my client and for his or her freedom. So I did well in those classes because I wanted to know how far I could go. And so let me give you an example. And this is, I can think of 2 murder cases where this came up. And these were, again, very high profile. And in both cases, 2 different judges, we were in the trial. And in both cases, the judges told me that I should not mention this particular evidence. Okay, in one case, it had to do with an eyewitness. And in another case, it had to do with physical evidence. Now, in my mind, those pieces of evidence were critical. In my mind, they were outcome determinative of the case. Are you guys with me? Are you following what I'm saying? So I thought they were very, very, very important. So I had a responsibility twofold. One, to make a record. That is, the stenographers who sit there and type out the trial. I had to do that in case I lost. I would have a point on appeal that the case could possibly be reversed. I also had a responsibility, not just for the appeal, but I had a responsibility to push as hard as I could to try to get that evidence in, or to get the judge to change his mind if in the middle of the trial, the circumstances or facts came out such that he might change his mind. And in both cases, and the reason that those rules exist is because the judge doesn't want the jury to be what they would call poisoned by that information. Well, this was very, very important. And so I skirted the edges of talking about that evidence as much as you possibly could without going over the line. And let me tell you how close I came to the line in both of those cases. In both cases, both judges took me into chambers with the prosecutor, and he pointed his finger at me and he said, "If you bring it up one more time, I will lock you up. I'm going to put you in jail for contempt of court. That's as close to the line as I could come. Willing to go to jail almost to make a point. 1 point, just 1 point, just one piece of evidence. Well, so that's what I did. And the way I resolved that ethical problem is I didn't have to have a meeting about it. I didn't have to talk to my fellow lawyers working on the case with me, because I knew I was going to do it. Because if I considered it to be battle in a sense with someone's life behind me. And a lot of times people would say, how can you defend somebody that you know is guilty? Well, in these particular cases, I didn't know they were guilty. I thought they were innocent. And I believe that to this day. But I did have cases where I knew the person was guilty. I didn't end up having a jury trial on those cases, but I might have a case in court. And my responsibility was to the Constitution, to the laws, and to make sure that the person got a fair shake. And so if it was a motion to suppress, to try to keep evidence out because it was illegally obtained, I would go as far as I possibly could to do that. And so these kind of questions, for some lawyers who maybe aren't as, maybe that isn't their specialty area of the law, maybe they only would take a criminal case occasionally, and maybe their practice area was, torts or, personal injury type case or whatever, then that kind of a question, maybe that would be a harder question for them. Maybe it would be a more challenging question. Maybe they would have to have a meeting about it. Oh, I see we're recording this. Great. Perfect. This is all going to end up on,
Yeah,
I don't care. Whatever. I don't care. It doesn't matter. This isn't off the record. It's on the record. I don't care. I mean, this is who I, and the other thing too that comes up
on the record, John, the
Yeah.
recording is for if we have students that
No, I'm just
I'll
kidding.
make it whatever. Sorry, we're not
I'm
publishing.
kidding. I don't care. But I mean, this is, I should say too, the comment of, well, this life is so much sweeter, blah, blah, blah. I would say that, and people will also say, well, gosh, you've changed so much. No, I haven't. I mean, my physical appearance has changed, but I still have an interest in social justice. I just went through a 3-minute little pitch on the way we treat farmers, the way we engage children, the way we, try to make sure farmers are paid more than anybody else would ever pay them. And we've done that for year after year. We've provided over 1 million school lunches to children in Tanzania and the Philippines. Just 17 people. That's all we are, just 17 employees in Askinosie Chocolate. I mean, that's an extension of social justice. It's just in a different form than it was. And I don't have to be as much of a D word.
Say it. You're allowed.
Well, we're recording. I don't want to be. But I don't have to be that. I can be a little bit of a nicer person, and I don't have to go all the way. I don't have to worry about somebody getting the death penalty if the stakes are high here, but not like that. So I mean, to me that's one way. Another interesting kind of ethical dilemma that happened in these kind of cases was, and this was, I think, more of a challenge. There were instances, I went to law school with a guy that we became really good friends in law school, studied we were in the same study group all 3 years. And that's a lot of time with, 3 or 4 people. And when I got out of law school, I went to Dallas to practice in a big firm for a little while. And then I came back, and at that time he was a prosecutor. Well, it destroyed our friendship, because remember when I said I wasn't friends with prosecutors? Well, I wasn't. I mean, and it's not something that I'm proud of, but I faced ethical dilemmas during the time that our friendship was unraveling. So I could see it happening. We were in each other's weddings. And then when it came time for me to advocate, or for him to advocate, it was too much. and our friendship couldn't withstand it.
Mm.
So it basically disintegrated. And then ultimately, he was diagnosed with a life-threatening illness. And anyway, then what do you think happened? I'm still practicing. He was practicing. What do you think? Anybody want to venture a guess? Shoulders shrugging.
Yeah.
Nobody?
Did he step down?
No, he was
Or
still
did he
he was
pass
still
away?
prosecuting. No, he's alive, and was for my years of practice.
You did not.
What's that?
You didn't reconcile then, right?
Is that kind of your speculation?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Anybody else? Okay, so here's what happened. When he was diagnosed with this illness, we saw each other at a bookstore and at Barnes and Noble one Saturday morning, and we were trading book ideas, even though, I mean, we despised each other at that point. But when he was diagnosed, we absolutely reconciled at that moment, and I never took another case against him. So I turned down a lot of cases in which he was going to be the opposing prosecutor, and he's a judge now. And I saw him on Friday, and he remains one of my best friends to this day. So the way I resolved that problem, and it's unfortunate that it took a life-threatening illness, to get to that point, but was by just reflecting on this and what's important and what's more important. And it was more important for me to preserve that relationship. So I stopped taking cases in which he would be the opposing lawyer. And that was a pretty long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that I would talk about now, a present ethical challenge that I'm facing in the chocolate business is, and Brett, you tell me when I'm going too long, because I don't want to overstay my welcome. But this is a little bit of a complicated story, but I'll try to tell it in a way that is short and not boring. There is, I don't buy and never have purchased cocoa beans in West Africa, Ghana, and Ivory Coast. 60% of the world's supply of cocoa beans comes from Ghana and Ivory Coast. The cocoa beans from there are, I don't think, as high a quality, but there is a real problem of child and slave labor in West Africa. This has been documented recently in the news and for the last couple of years, and this problem has been recognized by the chocolate industry for 20 years. And so none of the cocoa beans that we buy in any country have anything to do with child labor, certainly not slave labor. I make sure of it, and it's in our contracts, and we don't permit it. And I've never even seen it. So it's not a problem. But it is definitely a problem in the chocolate industry. So the big players, Hershey's, Mars, Nestle, those big players, the biggest in the world is a company you've probably never heard of called Barry Callebaut. Barry Callebaut is a Dutch company, and they're bigger than Hershey's and Mars and all of those combined, probably. And so they buy a lot of beans from West Africa to make their products. And I would say that right now the farmers that are growing beans in West Africa are subsisting on approximately $1.25 a day, which is right at the United Nations definition of extreme poverty. Well, there's a really fancy Dutch company that is full of marketing geniuses called Tony's Chocolonely. And they market themselves as slave-free chocolate. That is their moniker. So in bigger cities around the country, or if you're in duty-free shops in airports or whatever, or if you go to a Whole Food store in fill in the blank city, you will find walls of this chocolate. Tony's Chocolonely, slave-free chocolate. Well, the problem is, and a lot of people don't know this, they don't make their chocolate. They buy their beans in West Africa and they claim them to be slave-free. But guess who makes their chocolate? Barry Callebaut, the largest chocolate maker in the world, who is able to be profitable at this day because they buy cheap cocoa beans that are produced by slave and child labor in West Africa. So a law firm in Chicago came to me a couple of months ago, and they asked me if we would be willing to be part of a Supreme Court brief. It's called an amicus brief, friend of the court. If I would sign on to this brief in which there is 20-year-old litigation against Nestle and Barry Callebaut and others to prevent them from selling chocolate made with slave and child labor. I said, well, sure, I'll do it. But if Tony's has anything to do with it, I'm out. They said, well, they do have something to do with it because they're going to be in our brief, because they're a, you know, kind of touted by celebrities and others as this wonderful slave-free chocolate. And they finally listened to me and said, well, we won't make them part of your brief. At the last minute, they told me that they were going to still represent them, but they were going to write a separate amicus brief for Tony's. And the rest of us were going to be in our own amicus brief. I didn't like that. And then at the very last minute, after the brief was filed without telling us, they inserted another party along with the other 17 chocolate makers that I'm part of in this Supreme Court brief. And that other company is called Alter Eco. They're also a huge company, huge. You could probably find them at Mama Jean's. And they, I called the law firm and I said, have you already filed the brief? Yeah, we've already filed it. Well, why didn't you tell us that Alter Eco was in this? Well, we didn't, you know, it was very last minute. And I said, well, do you know who makes their chocolate? Barry Callebaut. Oh gosh, we didn't know that. So all of this has been filed with the Supreme Court. My name has been used in a press release. And it really upsets me that two of the companies in the amicus brief, and they're very big companies, huge companies, their chocolate is made by one of the named bad actors in the lawsuit that they're fighting against. So what do I do? Do I tell the law firm that they need to amend their lawsuit and take me out of it, which they probably can't do? It's already been filed with the Supreme Court. What do I do? Do I make a big deal in my press responses that people on my side, supposedly, are also themselves bad actors? Or do I say, well, since the bad actors on my side are fighting against child labor, I should consider them to be on my team? Let me tell you what I told the law firm. I said, you know, before all this came down, I said, this is analogous to an American car company going to BMW in 1943 in the middle of World War II and saying, hey, can you make a car for us? But we really want to make sure that it's not made by camp labor. We want to make sure that there aren't any Jewish prisoners making this car. So it's going to be Jewish labor free. But can you make this car for us? Yeah, sure, we can make this car Jewish labor free. So my point was that it's analogous to that. So what do you guys think about what I should do?
I
Well,
guess I'm curious. Oh, sorry.
sorry. I just wondered, have you had any conversations with anybody from the two companies? And if so, I mean, do they just cover it up? Do they play innocent? Like, how have those conversations gone?
Yeah, they claim, and they've even told the Washington Post, don't worry about it. Yeah, our chocolate is made by Barry Callebaut, but don't worry because it's all segregated in their facility. There's a special place in Amsterdam where our chocolate is made at their facility, but it's in a segregated, walled off, I'm using walled off as a metaphor, part of the facility where it's different, you know, and they're able to take our cocoa beans and segregate them from the rest of the other so-called tainted product. So that's what they say. That's their answer.
I guess I'm curious more about so the other people that are within this brief that are not using South Africa beans. How do
West
they feel
Africa
about
beans.
those two? Or sorry, West Africa. How do they feel about those two companies being written in on your guys' side of that brief?
That's a great question. I really haven't explored that with them because I don't know very many of them that well. But that's a good question. My suspicion is they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know. This is, even though it was in the Washington Post, it was really hidden. This stuff, obviously, this isn't something that they wave around on their packaging because they don't really want people to know it. But that's a good question. And that's something I could explore. I like that idea. I could explore that with the other 17 people. I could do a reply all and just take out the other people and then I'd know who they were and say, hey, what do you guys think about this? I like that.
Because my initial thoughts on your course of action would be to ensure that you have those other members on your side and collectively looking at that from a joint effort versus you taking it on yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of a UN action as opposed to a unilateral.
Mm-hmm.
Do you put yourself at any risk of litigation if you say public things about them?
Sure. I mean, there could be some kind of libel action or something like that, but truth is a defense.
Right.
So, and it would be a pretty sticky situation for them to sue another chocolate maker for saying that their chocolate bars are made, you know. Now, if I take it the step further and say what I said about BMW, then I'll have to sort of dot my I's and cross my T's about
Right.
that and really think about, but again, what we have found, I've been doing this for 15 years, you know, working with farmers. I've traveled a lot. I've marketed this a lot. I've spoken all over the country about this. And the problem that we face as marketers attempting to be socially just is that we're fighting people with more money who are virtue signaling. This is a big deal now. It started with greenwashing, where people claimed, huge multinational corporations that were claiming what they were doing for the environment. Turned out it wasn't true. We see this now in social washing. We see it with the biggest chocolate companies in the world claiming all of the great things they're doing in fill in the blank country, schools, clinics, all of these things. And it's not just in the chocolate industry, it's in almost every major, you know, multinational industry that you can think of. Everything from women's rights and women's issues to social issues to, we see it happening with Black Lives Matter right now. I mean, we see it, and so what you find are brilliant marketing people. Tom Shoes was the best. Tom Shoes was the absolute best at this. Buy one, give one. And I mean, as it turned out, the percent of their net operating profit to give one to some poor child in Honduras or whatever was nominal. to their balance sheet. Nominal. And it was brilliant though. And it wasn't sustainable. And I could talk for an hour about the Tom Shoes model and why I don't agree with it. But the point I'm making is, for example, in the fashion industry, there were all kinds of things 2 or 3 years ago where you could pretty much pull a shirt off the rack at Gap and know that it was made by children in Bangladesh who were making, 10 cents a day. And I mean kids, little kids working in Bangladesh. Well, I mean, what's happening now is with the advent of blockchain and combining blockchain with QR codes and with photo recognition, so you don't need a QR code. You can go to a store now. In fact, probably in the next 6 months, you'll be able to go to Mama Jean's, wave a camera over our chocolate bar. Just wave a camera over, not this one, but a different one. Just wave a camera over without a QR code, and it will pull up all the information you want to know about that chocolate bar. With not having to scan it, nothing. So what this means is that our ability to pull the information that's important to us as consumers before we make a buying decision is almost infinite. When you're in Target and you want to, you're waving your phone over the shirt that you want to buy, you're going to know where it came from, who made it, what it cost, and it will be easy. But the problem is, and this is always the problem, and Brett knows this way better than I do, and that is that technology always surpasses our ethical ability to make sense of it and understand it and resolve it. I don't care if it's medicine, science, computer, AI, VR, all of it. And so what I'm getting to, the point is what I fear is that often people don't care enough to make a decision based even on the information that they have because of other influences. There have been multiple studies about how people want to look virtuous, and this is, of course, this all happens in social media, but to look virtuous and may not make that same virtuous decision, a buying decision, for example. But if they appear virtuous, then that may be more important than actually being and I'm not judging that. I'm not making a judgment on that. What I'm saying is that then what do I do with that information? What do I do? Like, I don't have the package here, but we tell the story of the farmer on each bar. The string on the top of the bag of these beans comes from bags of cocoa beans. And the inside wrapper isn't cellophane. It's a home compostable wood pulp fiber called Nature Flex, and I've always used it for 15 years. And so the point is, do I sell you a chocolate bar because you care about the farmer that I'm sharing profits with, and that farmer makes more money from us than he or she would from anybody else? I mean, no, probably not. I'm not asking you to buy the chocolate bar because you care about that farmer. I wouldn't say it as bluntly in another setting, perhaps, but what I want you to buy the chocolate bar because it tastes good, because you think it's high quality, that you think it's a good value, even at, $8, $9, $10, because of what I just told you 30 minutes ago, that farmers in West Africa are making $1.25 a day, and Nestle can sell you a chocolate bar that's this size, 3 ounces, 85 grams, for $2 or $1. I can't do that. Which one is greater value? This at $2 at a Come and Go, or this at Mama Jean's at $10? This at Mama Jean's at $10. It's a better value, because but remember that other bar is made on the backs of slaves. It is modern day slavery, setting aside even the issue of child labor. And so what I hope that you buy it for is because it tastes good, it's high quality, it's a good value, and ultimately, if you get to know our story and you go to our website, askinosie.com, and you like the story and it resonates with you, then what I hope ultimately is not so much that you care about the farmer, because that's very unlikely. truly. What I hope is that you care that I care.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I hope. Why? Because if you see me caring and I'm out there and I'm going on these trips and I'm slugging my way, 60 hours to some remote village in Tanzania, and it's important to me, that you're going to think, that's kind of cool. I wonder what inspires me. What do I care about? What can I, throw my whole self into that I care about? And so that's the last thing that I want to talk about.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things Brett asked me to talk about is kind of the last issue, which is, well, what do you do personally, in your own life in honoring these conflicts or stresses that are in business or personal life? And for me, there really is. I don't even know what work-life balance means. I think that's a joke. And you guys know that too, because you're in a class and it's 6:15, it's dark outside. There's no work-life balance for you. And so we might as well just put that aside because it doesn't exist. And plus it's okay. It's cool because maybe some of you, this is a graduate class. You're taking this because it's fun. You want to do this. You want to learn about this. And it's not drudgery. This is cool because you're learning these things. You're going to get to apply these things, and the things that you're doing or working or whatever. And so for me, there's a couple of things. One is one of the ways that I deal with these issues is through awareness. So when I was younger, this is why I showed a picture, of my granddaughter when we first, oh, it's even my screensaver. Well, what do you know? Me and Karen and my little, why do I mention awareness now? Because when I was first a dad, I wasn't aware of jack shit. I was not aware of anything. I was aware of winning. I was aware of doing a good job, working, making money, and that's what I was aware of. Well, when I said a moment ago that I'm still the same person, yes, I am. This is what I believe. My soul was very aware. My soul has not changed one bit since it was born into this world, and won't change until I die. And then it won't change. So in other words, it was there all the time. It's just whether or not I was aware. And so one of the cool things about being a grandfather is that I am aware of so much more stuff. Now, I can rock Goldie to sleep. And Lauren's always like, Dad, you don't have to rock her all the way through her nap. You can just rock her to sleep. And then you can put her in this little fancy thing that goes back and forth. And you can just do that. And I'm like, no. I want to rock her for an hour and a half. And it's like a prayer to me. Rocking her is prayer. And I don't mean because I'm praying. It is a prayer. It's a form of prayer. And I'm aware of that. All of the cares of the world for me just completely melt away when she's just, I could cry right now talking about it. When she just closes her eyes, she's just sleeping, and I see, she's kind of like me and Lauren, she's very intense, just even at 4 months, and she doesn't want to take a nap. She's going to struggle. She doesn't want to give it up, and that's where I come in. And Lauren was like, Dad, I didn't think you'd be that good with Goldie. That you could even do that. I was like, that's what I did for you. I'm good at that. And so I see Goldie, I'm rocking her, I'm doing this before I can even get in the rocker. And she's just fighting. She doesn't want to go to sleep. And then she lets go. And I'm aware of that. I see it. She just closes her eyes, and then I rock her. And I'm like, this is it. What else is there? I don't need anything else. And so what I'm saying to you is that one of the tools that I use is awareness. It's just awareness. I told Brett last week, I said, I'm going through right now, and have for the last couple of months, a very dark time. In my tradition, we call it a dark night, the dark night of the soul. I am experiencing that, and I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm in it. I am in it. And but I'm aware of those moments of joy, like with Goldie or whatever this morning. Well, I live in Lawrence County and I can walk out in the woods and I can experience that and have joy for that. And so the tool that I would encourage you all to think about is just the very simple tool of being aware, just of like being aware of like, oh crap, I feel terrible. What is going on in my life? And can I think about that for a minute without grabbing at everything to stop it? In other words, without grabbing at Facebook or any kind of social media, or can I just sit with it just for a minute to be aware of how shitty I feel? And that I think has been for me, just in the last couple of months. And then the other thing that I've really hung on to is this thing that this one of Thomas Merton's novices, who's still alive, his name is James Finley. He's written several books. Brett probably knows of him. And he said this thing that I heard a couple of months ago, and he said, I'm not going to break faith with my awakened heart. And so when everything is really bad, I just tell myself that. I'm gonna hold on to that. And even if it's dark and I can't see where I'm going and I'm depressed and I have a lot of anxiety and I can feel it in my chest, I'm just not gonna break faith with what I know.
Mm-hmm.
And I use that all the time, even in what might outwardly look like some kind of academic ethical dilemma. But I use the things that I'm talking to you about right now, even in those situations. Right now, we have employees in the chocolate factory, for one reason or another, who may run out of what's called FCRA. The government passed a law in April for employers to be reimbursed for employees, and you guys know this, many of you have jobs, that if an employee has up to 2 weeks of time off for COVID related, whether it's taking care of a child or a loved one or they themselves, they have up to 2 weeks of reimbursed, and the employer will be reimbursed through a payroll tax credit. Well, we have a couple of employees that are about to run out of that. They don't have any more PTO. They don't have any more FCRA. And I reached out to our Congressman, Billy Long, and said, what does the Treasury Department say about this? Is there any help? And he put me in touch with one of his legislative assistants who did, in fact, contact Treasury, and they did, to their credit, get back with me and say, no, there is no more help. That is a real ethical dilemma. My sales are down 25 to 30% and have been since March. We forecasted that almost to the dollar. And we can hang on at that and be profitable and nobody's lost their job. But I face a very real thing. And right now is our time. The fourth quarter is it, man. This has always been, we have, sometimes a third or more of our sales come in the fourth quarter because Christmas holidays. So it's very real, this idea of people's lives who are struggling because of this pandemic, and we will have run out of options for them. And so I have to face this issue of what am I going to do? Do I just pay them out of money that we really don't have? Do I borrow money? What do I do? And so I'm not asking for your answers on that because I know this is a very real thing. And so I will use my tools. I have been a faithful prayer, for 20 years. And my practice is one that's kind of connected to Assumption Abbey down south of Ava. And so I have a practice 5 mornings a week that even when I'm, depressed and feeling bad, I do it. It's a routine, but it's also a practice. And it's also a discipline, you know, just like you'd go run in the morning and you don't feel like running, you're going to run. Not me, you maybe, but, and just like someone might play an instrument, you know, like I bet you if we were to talk to Brett, I bet his music and his guitar would be a similar kind of practice and discipline that would bring him similar prayerful experience like the kind I'm talking about. But oh boy, it's almost an hour. Well, we have like a few minutes if you guys want to ask me any questions.
Yeah, let's open it up for if anybody's got something on their mind.
It's me again. I have a question.
You bet.
Going back to something that you said earlier, when you worked with clients that you knew were guilty, did your clients reveal that to you? Did you want to know? And does that affect your decision making?
Yes, I did want to know, and it would really make me mad to find out things that I wanted to know in the beginning, and I found out later, you know, in other ways that would really make me upset. And so, yes, you hear stories or watch TV about lawyers like, no, don't tell me, don't say, don't say. I'm like, no, I want to know it all because I want to know what I'm dealing with, and I don't want to be blindsided or surprised by something. And whether or not they would, to use your word, reveal to me, as all of you know, you know, it could be anything. I mean, unless it's like a bank robbery or something. But I mean, if it's, let's say it's a drug case. I mean, these are complicated. These are very complicated. I mean, people are often charged with, you know, very, very serious crimes that could put them away for life. I mean, were you really making methamphetamine, or did you possess a smaller quantity than, I mean, these are questions that could be the difference between 5 years and 30 years. Mm-hmm. And did you really have a gun, or was that somebody else's gun? Because that could be, if you're in federal court, a mandatory 5 years on top of whatever. So these are, so while I would say, well, did you make methamphetamine? I mean, it wouldn't be that usually that overt. It would be, let's go through the facts. This happened, you did this, you did this, you did this, and then in many cases, I would cross-examine people before they would even hire me. I mean, it would be very uncomfortable for a potential client because I would just make them feel very uncomfortable wanting to know the facts. Of course, it was all attorney-client privilege communication, so it was all between us. But and in some cases, not only did I cross-examine them, but once they hired me, I ran my own parallel investigation to determine whether they were telling me the truth. I would investigate them and their family members in some very serious cases to determine whether or not they were lying to me. So I took that very seriously, to answer your question.
Well, and I had a question too. In undergrad, I interned at the Greene County Public Defender's Office. I'm assuming that you had like a private practice for defense. Did you work public defense before you had your private practice?
No. I worked in a big law firm, a Dallas firm, and did white collar criminal defense. And then I moved back home to Springfield and started a private criminal defense practice immediately. But I think it's a great, you know, our public defender system nationally is in dire need of reform. It is itself a crime as to the overworked and underpaid public defenders around this country. And it's really sad. And I hope that maybe in the coming months and years, we can address this nationally because there is a constitutional right to counsel and it's not happening. Let's just put it this way. If you have a lot of money and you can hire me, or if you have nothing, and no offense against public defenders, but they're overworked, you're going to get a much different outcome with me, not because I'm a brainiac, but just because I have time to work on the case. Mm-hmm. You know, I have time to look at everything, and I have time to, you know that if I need to be I can be.
I wanted to ask a little bit more about your decisions on not buying chocolate from West Africa. So I am a fundraiser, and I've been doing a lot of work on our equity and where we take money from and understanding good money versus bad money. And we're trying to really go with this philosophy that, like, if we don't work with a company to make better change, like if we don't work with Chevron to have more to fund sustainable issues, then they're going to continue to be this big bad company. But we've also decided we don't want money from Chevron whatsoever.
Okay.
And so I'm curious if there are farmers and there's ways to do capacity building within West Africa to help change the slave and child labor issues, or if it's just so bad that it's
Were you going to
have
say
to
corrupt?
stay.
You were going to say corrupt. weren't you?
Yeah, I was going to say
You said
corrupt.
corrupt, and it's very corrupt. The whole thing is completely and totally infiltrated with corruption from top to bottom. It's regulated in both Ghana and Ivory Coast by the government. You cannot buy cocoa beans directly from farmers the way I do in all these other countries. You must go through the regulatory body, and there are NGOs. You know what I mean by NGO, right? I mean, so Gates Foundation and other huge NGOs that are capacity building in West Africa. They're doing their best. Interestingly, some of the biggest donors to those NGOs are who? Nestle, Mars, Hershey's. So
Yeah.
it's a very incestuous form of corruption that goes to the very core of the countries in those cases, because they're, these are big exports for those countries. It's a bad situation. I face corruption even in Tanzania. It's really bad. Okay, let me tell you
You
how
had a
this
story. I remember last year you were in the middle of because you went and met with some.
Yes. Well, I did that after I talked to your class.
Mhm.
And now what we have is in January, we opened a preschool that we built in the village for children who have no early childhood education. There's 100 kids in the school. It's a beautiful school, and the farmers run it. They're the managers of it. We were facing no enrollment, and not because of the pandemic, because I found this out last week. There is a cocoa governing body in a neighboring town. I don't mean a city, I mean a town. It's an hour away. They govern all the cocoa beans. My partner farmers have an exemption. Okay, so they don't have to be governed by this board. The officials at that governing body are jealous of the farmers. They office next to the education officials in the same little, building. The education officials decided they were going to go around to neighboring villages and individually tell families and parents that they should not send their kids to this school. That's what we're facing. This is in Tanzania, so this corruption exists in every single country in Ecuador. It's terrible terrible. There's a gold mining company from Canada called London Gold that basically runs the entire Amazon region. And they have a 20-year gold mining contract. They run and govern the entire southern part of the country in the Amazon. You cannot do anything without going through them. I can, but I face, it's bad. And you're probably thinking, golly, well, is America the only place where, oh, it's in America too. It's the only difference is it's more sophisticated, and people wear fancier clothes. That's the only difference. It is. In fact, I would say it's even more insidious. Give you an example. So we had cocoa beans coming in to the West Coast. They came into Long Beach from the Philippines. In 2002 or 3, President Bush outsourced all inspections of of ports and containers to private agencies. They have private contracts to inspect all containers. They held one of my containers up randomly, nothing wrong with it. A private company at a port, on behalf of the Customs and Border Protection, and they held it up and they said, we're not going to release it until you give us $4,000 for all of our inspection fees. This is a 20-foot container. Give us $4,000 or we're not going to let it go on the rail and be trucked to you in Springfield. For no violation, nothing. All they did was randomly take off the beans, put them back on, do an x-ray some of the bags, no violation, no nothing, give us $4,000. Wow. So, I mean,
did you pay the $4,000?
Yes, I mean, I had to have those cocoa beans. I needed to have them. It was 1/4 of our production that year. So, so these issues and these ethical issues, I mean, we are faced with this. And I will say the ethical issues I face in business are way more complicated, thorny, and challenging than I ever faced as a lawyer, ever. Why? And you think about it. Why? Because I had a rule book as a lawyer. The rules of professional conduct were right there in front of us. And we always had a venue, a place we could go, a judge. I lost almost all of those arguments, not trials, but in front of judges. But we knew we had a place to go, a backstop. There is no backstop in business. Court, what am I going to do? Little company sue somebody? No. Like this Tony's company, they shouldn't get away with being able to do this and save their slaves free, but yet the people who make their chocolate, who make every single one of their chocolate bars is made. That company exists on the backs of slaves and children in West Africa. Nobody's going to stop them. This litigation that's in the Supreme Court now has been going on for 20 years. 20 years. Trying to prevent child labor. So, yes, there's corruption.
Well, Shawn, the thing that I love the most about this is that you delivered by making us feel really terrible and really great, which is always my goal. Like
Right.
As a teacher, it's always my goal to make students feel like the world's going to hell, but there's hope. And I think you did a fantastic job of that.
Well, there's a lot of good things going on in the world too.
Yeah.
So
No, I agree.
But I sure do appreciate the chance to talk to you guys. I'm looking at the chat.
We're grateful that
That's
you
awesome.
are doing what you're doing, where you're doing it, and what's the address on Commercial Street where they can come pick up their
Yep,
Christmas
514. We have a walk-up window. You can't come in the factory now because of COVID, but we have a walk-up window, and we're regulated by the FDA, so we can't let anybody in the factory except workers. But we
Right.
ship it all over the country. Askinosie.com. But
And it's
I
that
sure
time
do thank you
now where
guys.
the
Yes,
shipping
it is.
is probably cheaper because you don't have to put dry ice and stuff
Exactly. Yeah, we don't have to put ice packs in it. So
Yeah.
someone just said my dad orders the malt balls in bulk. Man, I just went to the factory over the weekend and personally grabbed my own personal gallon bag of malt balls because there's nothing healthy about a malt ball too, by the way. But so yeah, thanks a lot. And thank you, Brett, for what you're doing. Thank you. Truly.
Well, I really always love hearing from you. I feel renewed and refreshed hearing your words. It's always good to see you, and we need to have lunch soon.
Yeah, we do. Well, thank you guys, all of you. I wish you the best of luck. And I'm not hard to find if you ever need to email or anything. I have a little blog, ShawnAskinosie.com, and I'm easy to find. So best wishes to all of you. Take care.